Perfect. So we're just going to go ahead and welcome to Proud to be KW. This is an inclusive leadership training brought to you by myself. I'm part of the Rainbow Network in KW, so that's a different chapter. So this is I'm more of a vessel. I'm no expert, but I'm passionate about DEI. And my community that I represent. So hopefully that you take some nuggets away here. I want to celebrate each of you who've actually taken time to come and grow your understanding of the LGBTQ plus community. So has anyone felt a little bit overwhelmed how to keep up with how to be inclusive, especially in terms of LGBTQ clients, and has anyone felt a little bit confused of the ever-changing platform? Yes, I see some head nods here. Yes, right. And that's kind of what we're trying to piece together. So if we match some history with some inclusion, and we can kind of go from there to see what we're doing. Lost my train of thought. So does anyone know why we celebrate Pride? Venture a guess? No? So it was just to bring recognition. So it's appreciate the relevance of the history of Pride and how it's been blended into our world today. The rainbow is actually a symbol that's got significance. So we'll go over that a little bit later. So we've got to analyze the relevance to our industry as well. So we're going to mash with the Rainbow Network and our industry and just see where we're at from there. And what Keller Williams specifically is doing to help bridge the gap between the community and real estate. So that's a little agenda. You can see the learning objectives of what we're going to take away here. Stonewall. Anyone on Zoom or in person, does anyone know the word Stonewall and what you don't answer? Anyone know what that represents?
I've heard it and I don't know it.
That's okay. That's okay. So in June of 1969, a gay bar in Greenwich Village in New York was raided. And, it was the usual where everyone was ripped out of the bar and beaten outside. And this day of all days, people decided that they were going to kick back and actually protest and fight back with the police. And it's the mostly targets were gay men. So who fought back the most was actually more lesbians, trans people. And that's who caused a riot. There were several days of riots after that. And the next year, to sort of celebrate that, was the uprising of the first annual Christopher Street Day Parade. So hence why Pride marches started from Stonewall. Now, over the global world, Pride Month is different because obviously they didn't have the same Stonewall experience. So that's why they don't march in June necessarily. But we march in June here that actually started in Stonewall, Greenwich Village in New York. So that's one of the reasons there was sort of very kickback to what we have to do and how people were treated. So again, this is going to feel like a lot of history classes, but these are just very potent times in the LGBTQ plus timeline that if you sort of dive in and want to acknowledge some of these events, then that will help, sort of bridge the gap between yourself and others. So Defense of Marriage Act in 1996. Does anyone know what happened in the Defense of Marriage? So there was a lot of kickback and there was a lot of states that were tried to authorize and ban same-sex marriage in 1996. So this was something that they wanted the federal government to define, that marriage is only between a man and a woman. So the states actually didn't need to recognize same-sex marriages that were performed in other states. And this is a big case because this kind of like, trickles into everything else. So Lawrence versus Texas. So this is when it invalidated the sodomy law across the United States, which decriminalized homosexuality in every state across the United States, which is so funny because I don't know about you, but 2003 seems horrendously close, recent. Yes. And that was just when we made homosexuality legal in all states. 2009, Matthew Shepard and James Byrd, they were brutally murdered. So this actually tweaked the law between the Hate Crimes Act that was signed in as a response to their murders. And the measure actually expanded to the United States federal hate crime law to include crimes against sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. Don't ask, don't tell. Again, 2011 is very recent, but that was just repealed from the military because traditionally, if you were homosexual in the military, you could be discharged, dishonorably discharged if it was found out that you were a service member of the military. So therefore, don't ask, don't tell was just basically encouraging those to stay hidden so that you wouldn't have to be punished. So that was a big landmark in 2011. A landmark case of the Supreme Court, let's see, I'm terrible. We'll just do versus Hodges, Obergefell, ruled that state bans on marriage equality are unconstitutional and nationwide marriage equality. This was a big one, even for myself. This meant that in any state, marriage was legal. The same-sex marriage was made legal. Again, only in 2015. 2020, the Supreme Court ruling in Georgia extended protections against employment discrimination to include sexual orientation and gender identity, making it illegal for employers to discriminate against LGBTQ plus employees. So what are some of the ahas about just this timeline in general? What's your first reaction, knee-jerk?
What took so long?
What took so long? Very
all this came within the last decade.
Within the last decade, yeah, it's
Crazy.
Anyone on Zoom? Any ahas?
Yeah, same. Why did it take so long?
Exactly.
It's all things. Most of the things are in the century.
Well, and even we've had like landmark things, and then I still feel like in today there are things that are like we've had these things that have been great leaps forward, and now we still have things that are taking us.
It's funny because that's such a good point. We've had these leaps forward, but yet we still feel like there's gaps and there's missing. And I think if you're in the community, you do feel a little bit of a sense of snakes and ladders. You remember that board game? Like we will, catapult and bridge gaps and move forward only to, hit a snake and be tumbled all the way down. So yes, that's the unfortunate, and I think it's governed by each state, and that's what makes the US so hard to plow forward. Not that there's any other option, but given states, other governments, and it's just a little bit difficult because there's different rules for different places. And segueing into that, so globally, I thought this was really interesting. So if you can see the color timeline, so if it's dark blue, imagine it's got the most protections against discrimination based on just sexual orientation. And as you can imagine, the deeper, darker red, maroon it's criminalization of consensual same-sex acts between adults. And the dark red, maroon wine color is actually punishable by death. And we are today, 2023, and again, that's why it's so important, because I think, yes, it's all fine and well when we look into the United States, but even then, if you look at what color the United States is, we're not quite there yet. So it's just definitely an eye-opening education that some parts of the world don't even consider this. It will not even go to government. It's punishable by death. So moving on. The rainbow only started with 6 colors. So actually it was a gay artist in the US that someone asked him to, can you come up with a symbol? Can you come up with something that represents our community? And it started with just 6 colors, and they had to be tweaked a little bit because of printing. But now we can look at the rainbow, and we have actually morphed it in recent times to represent a different area of the queer community. So we'll just go through them. There's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, which again, queer is an interesting one because we've kind of taken that word back. Queer used to be a very offensive slur. And we've sort of taken the power out of that, and we use that as an umbrella term. So I use that very often, like the queer community, my queer family, because that's an all-encompassing word to me and what I think it represents. Questioning, intersex, ally, asexual, and pansexual. Is any of these terms new to anyone? Yes, which one?
Intersex.
Intersex. That's funny because I think that one has the most misconceptions, because we're often taught from a young age that sex is just male and female, right? It's, you know, you're in biology class, you can picture it now, you know, but this is someone who chromosomally, for example, has both of the XX and the XY chromosomes. I'm not your biology teacher, by the way, just full disclosure. That
biological.
Yes, right. Asexual is a person who genuinely doesn't feel sexual attraction or desire. So that's kind of going to go into our next slide, and how this sort of blends the genderbread person. So this is a really important one, because this, I think, for realtors will be very relevant, because the genderbread person is not something that you always would assume, right? If you see someone who maybe presents as, you know, something, it could actually mean something very different. So we'll go into it. So this is the helpful way to distinguish between sex, gender, gender identity, and gender expression and sexuality. Did anyone know there was a difference between each? Give or take.
Much to this extent.
Yeah, much to this extent, right? So we'll go through it. We'll head, shoulders, knees, and toes. We'll just start. So my gender identity is what I identify as. So I am a woman. I identify as she, her. And this is a really important thing for your clients. Always, always, always assume that someone knows themselves better than you do. No judging, no, well, I think it's just a phase. I hate that expression, right? So always assume that someone knows their identity more than you do. So that means using pronouns that align with who they are. So gender expression. Anyone want to guess what this could be? How I express my gender?
Like how you present yourself, dress yourself.
Yes. How I present myself, how I dress myself. So I will take myself as an example. I could rock in in very masculine clothes, very androgynous one day. I could be very presenting masculine, but therefore I could swing the other day. I could be in a dress, heels, whatever I would like to present, express myself on the day. I fluctuate in the scale. I don't have to be one thing or the other. I just keep it moving on what I want to express my gender. And that doesn't actually have anything to do with my identity and how I'm attracted to necessarily. So anatomical sex, we'll just go, also attraction, we'll go to attraction. So it doesn't necessarily mean who I'm attracted to also has to align with how I identify, how I express, or who I'm attracted to. So none of these, actually, you can see in the symbol, like identity has nothing to do with expression, sex, gender, or sexual orientation. They're all very fluid. So lost where I'm saying. So anatomical sex is our biology and anatomy. And the importance here is that gender, identity, and expression are not equivalent to sexual or romantic attraction. Someone can be trans or heterosexual or non-binary and asexual, or cisgender and pansexual, and every other possible combination. So again, that's something that we have to know is very fluid, and none of these are connected, just because I have met a lot of people who, if you assume they're one thing, again, I'll use myself as an example. I'm in sports world. I would meet many females that presented very masculine. So what would be the first thing that I would assume? Lesbian. I would be in the sports world, and if they rocked up and they were very masculine dressing, and in walks their husband and child,
Yes.
right? Shame on me for assuming, right? And that's the thing with all of these. Your gender expression, your identity, attraction, sex does not necessarily mean anything. And again, there is, I'll go back to it, the debate where we have some trans in our community, but to them, they're heterosexual. They actually don't need to identify in the queer community, because who they are, if it's a trans man, I am attracted to female. So therefore they see themselves as heterosexual. So again, just a delicate way to show support that way. What's another way we could show support to this model?
Pronoun.
Ask them their pronouns. Yes.
Yeah, it's worse to assume, and if you're not sure, you can just politely ask someone, what pronoun I use, he and him, what are your pronouns? And then if you focus on yourself first and then ask them, that's on you. And they'll correct you if you step over the line, and just be respectful and move forward.
Yep. Anyone else? Anything to add to that?
It was a great quote from Ted Lasso, and he says, "Be more curious and less judgmental."
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yes, exactly. And yes, so we'll take the pronouns, for example. So again, we're never sure, so therefore we always have to assume that someone knows themselves better than we do. So they could be non-binary, so therefore it's really important to them to use the pronouns they, them. So when you're talking in emails and you're in title, escrow, blah blah blah, you don't want to say, can you give him a call? Can you just give her a call? She's CC'd. They are CC'd in the email. And again, it's become something that if you are they, them pronouns, you just sort of accept it. But let's give them the space to be in charge. Let's ask before we assume. And let's open that up. Be better, shall we say. Let's be better in ourselves. So as we're diving more out of history and into, plowing forward and being realtors and representing home buyers in this community, it might not be in your business plan. You might not think, the low attendance today, but maybe catch me in 5 years, because as Gen Z are growing up, they are more comfortable identifying outwardly, in the LGBTQ queer community. That doesn't necessarily mean there's only 2.6 baby boomers. It doesn't necessarily mean Gen X or millennial. It just means maybe they're not as comfortable living outwardly as the younger generation. So look at this chart, give or take, there could be more. But again, the attitude of before, it's sort of, it was a way of life to just hide, you know, so
That's more simple.
much more safer that way, exactly. So the stigma, it was just so hurtful for other generations. Let's be sympathetic to that. But again, as we move forward, we're going to have to be more comfortable working with these homeowners that are in this community that are ready to live their life, you know, unapologetically. So this is the percentage of potential clients, just to show you. If you didn't think it was relevant to you, then it might be. So just another chart here, just data is really helpful to zoom out. So the queer community own homes at roughly 49%. So that's slightly higher than the Black or African American community and nearly parallel with the Hispanic, Latino, it seems, and much less than, of course, the white and non-Hispanic home ownership. But again, skewed a little bit because Freddie Mac doesn't necessarily count for intersection. You know, you could be Black and queer, you know, so again, but I just want to show you the volume. If anyone thought the queer community was this in the housing world and they thought the queer community was insignificant and you're never going to meet, especially here in the Bay Area, we're right next to San Francisco. I feel like this is something you have to be aware of, that these might be, not saying that you need to niche up or anything, but this is something that you will eventually come across.
Good number.
Mhm.
It's a big number.
Yeah, surprisingly, right? You know, because again, you just don't know what you don't know. So again, I thought this was a really interesting take home, that the LGBTQ home buyers and sellers had a median income slightly below the non-queer home buyers and sellers, but also they're a little bit younger. And again, take for the nuance that we missed by looking at the LGBTQ as a whole. Bisexual buyers and sellers have a lower medium income than lesbian and gay. However, they are probably also younger too. So again, I think this is a very, very cool, triumphant slide, because although it feels like we've been kicked and trampled on, and you know, there is a rise to be better and, you know, just to go against all odds, you know, medium income, thriving. Not saying that anyone got here easily, not saying that this is not tough for anyone, but it's nice to know the gap is increasingly shortening as time goes on. But again, there's still more work to be had, even though, you know, we're landmarking. So again, very relevant to real estate. You've got this lovely client that you've met in San Francisco who now has to relocate to Atlanta, Georgia. You put them in touch, everything's great, da 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 da. Did you know that when you send them away, that they could be discriminated against? Because every state doesn't necessarily have sexual orientation protections and discrimination based on who they are, whether it's loans, whether it's rental applications. So again, although we celebrate some things, there's still a huge gap where we're lacking equal representation, equal rights. It's just still a bit sad that there's this much discrimination, even just across borders.
A lot of states.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I know, if we just look at these colors here. Yep. Again, the somber part, if you're representing a client and you think everything is very traditional, you send them to go get approved, everything seems hunky-dory, and then you wouldn't actually know that their approval rate is 3 to 8% lower. So for same-sex couples, that was the reality. They were 73% more likely to be denied a loan than heterosexual couples. That number is astronomical. And in the end, they actually paid more interest and more fees, combined, added up as much as 86 million annually. So the discrimination is not specific to lenders. We're not just saying, go make sure your lenders, this is systemic. This is deep-rooted systemic behaviors that I think we can affect and change as realtors by being involved and being outwardly loud about it. I'm sure you're not surprised by this slide. So NER members. Yes. And that reflects the generational differences as well that we saw on the earlier slides too, that, we're not necessarily comfortable being in our own skin, or when those surveys come up, what do you identify as? Maybe some of us don't want to check the box, and or NER typically attracts the realtors that have been in the business for a very long time. Maybe it's a generational thing, like I said. So how do you see these numbers changing as Gen Z moves into the arena?
I think they have to change when Gen Z, because Gen Z 2003, I do all the onboardings, and I see some people, nobody from 2003 have I onboarded. It's all maybe 2000s or 2001.
Yeah.
So I feel like they have to shift when we see Gen Z start coming into the industry.
Yeah, which again, the platform changes, everything changes in our community, everything changes what we talk about, what's important to us, what gets voted for NER. So hopefully that's a good thing as they sort of enter into the work world and enter into real estate. So maybe something to think about. Can you mentor Gen Z?
It's kind of like the history of left-handedness.
Yeah.
They'll call me out. Before you're like, oh, there's no left-handed people, and then this is very common.
Yes,
And
exactly.
suddenly there's a spike in left-handedness, and you're like,
Exactly.
whoa, where do those left-handed people come from?
They couldn't have been here before. There's no way. They just suddenly decided to be left-handed because it's trendy, as they would say. So again, how it relates to you as a real estate agent, and as you can see in red is the heterosexual group, and in gray is the queer group. So very interesting. Now this is not a competition, and nobody's saying that queer realtors are better, right? But I do think, and a lot of discussion about this is then when we look to queer realtors, the inclusivity is oozing from, there is no judgment, there is not saying that heterosexual feel like that too, but it maybe helps with clientele, it maybe helps with others to just come as you are, that's kind of some all embracing. But it is really interesting again to know that the LGBTQ plus realtor, if we look at this, over 200,000, we're at 5% and 3% compared to. So very interesting. Might be someone, your peers, might be someone, selling real estate often, maybe something to learn from their take homes. I think it would be a great way to kind of go forward with that. So just a small plug-in. I'm part of the KW Rainbow Network, and it's an independent membership-based association of just LGBTQ plus realtors and professionals associated with Keller Williams. It takes pride in the company mission and unique culture with a commitment to build diversity worth celebrating. So these associate staff leaders, we're committed to serving our community. And additionally, this network is worth $1 billion with a B. Billion with a B. So again, it just shows you that, if you are looking for a safe space, unfortunately, we're not accepting any applicants for allies, because that would just defeat the purpose. This is our community. This is a safe space to share. So if anyone wants any more information about that, great. Any ahas in that? Well, I'll let you think. So, because my final words will be, you're probably wondering, we went through a lot of history, we went through a lot of nuggets, but my biggest, if you don't remember anything from this slide, anything at all, my one advice to you to embrace the queer community would be authenticity. So Lorna, how do I go out and how do I, treat my LGBTQ plus clients? Authenticity. So who you are in the shadows will come out eventually, who you are as a business person. So have you tracked who you donate money to and what they stand for and what they lead by? Do you just, when it's June and the Northern Hemisphere is warming up, do you throw up a rainbow flag on your social media? Anyone know what rainbow washing is? It's when large companies do the exact same thing. June hits, rainbow, everything, everywhere, anything, anywhere, rainbow. They don't donate a single penny to projects that would actually help the queer community. No proceeds from any merchandise, nothing, not a penny will leave their corporate bank account and actually help. In fact, if you track some companies, the sad part is that they will be donating maybe some political, we'll not get into political, but maybe some political leaning that actually oppose, anti-LGBTQ plus charities. So rainbow washing would be, just throwing up a pride flag and saying you're an ally. If you're an ally, authenticity. Do you know that youth LGBTQ plus are the most likely to be made homeless? And why is that? When they come out to their parents, out the door. They're on the streets and there's charities that can help them and provide resources for them. So again, if you want to really embrace this, who you are authentically will show. So it's not just if you've done your homework, if you know what Stonewall is, it's not just that. If you authentically care about this movement, then that will help your business. Ahas?
I think my ahas are, since I've left home, I feel like I've had to do a lot of learning on this topic.
Yep.
And I think my ahas are, I think a lot in authenticity. I've been thinking a lot about social media and what I post on social media. And usually it's like a fluffy, here's a fun picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have been feeling recently that I feel like my, what I put out needs to be more than just surface level.
Yes.
And I feel very strong. I'm a very religious person and I feel very strongly about being an ally in the religious community. And so I don't know, just seeing this makes me feel like I need to do more to show my authenticity and show my allyship. And then with that, just creating awareness.
I think that's a good aha as well, just showing your authenticity. And I think a lot of people fear the backlash, oh, what about those clients that I know oppose this? Or what about those clients that would unfriend me from Facebook? And, the choice is yours, right? And I think if that's your moral compass, maybe dive deeper into that. If that's what stops you putting a rainbow flag up, if that's what stops you, hey, I just donated 10% of my commission check to this youth housing crisis, this queer youth housing crisis, and I'm proud about it, and I'm going to shout about it. And if you get some unfollows, who you are in the shadows is who you'll be as a business person. And that will ooze out, and I know I don't have to brag about it. I know my conscience is clear, what I represent, what I donate to, brands that I use, that I don't use, that's just my choice. And I understand everyone else always has a choice. So I think that was a really good point. Maybe call to action.
So there's still a lot need to be done. There's still a lot of struggle. There's still market momentum.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of hardship.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things where it's great for the month of June. but it shouldn't just be the month to
It's true.
honor that.
That's a good point. Mhm.
I think also a lot of education is necessary,
Yeah.
right? These classes wonderful, so
Mhm.
more insight, but also to be able to share
Mhm.
and more inclusion.
Mhm.
More.
Well, and first on the calendar, it doesn't have to be June, because on October 11th is National Coming Out Day.
Mm.
So if you feel compelled, maybe do a post, maybe talk about it. You know, maybe something you wouldn't be involved in before. That's a big thing that's coming out. And again, going back to authenticity, if someone on your timeline, if someone on your, you know, your social media, someone in person has shared that they have come out, private message them. You know, I'm here to support you and I'm so proud of you. You know, that champion that, because that is the hardest, scariest moment that no one can prepare you for, whether it goes bad or good, right? It's a big boulder of weight that suddenly is off. So that's a really cool thing. It's National Coming Out Day on October 11th. Be involved if you wish. So that's the next holiday that's coming up.
Can I add something?
Mhm.
One thing to think about is, when these folks do come out, they usually get a lot of flack, like they're kicked out of their home. That causes trauma, their friends have left them, that stays with them. So if you approach them and aren't authentic, and they, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is they're always gonna have that angst that people are gonna judge them, ridicule them. At least I know I do.
Yes.
I still live with that every day. And so that colors my attitude. And so keep that in mind as you're dealing with these folks. You know, they've been through a lot, they've been ridiculed, put down, teased. You don't know what they've gone through college. I know I can tell you many horror stories and we don't have enough time.
Yep.
But
Yep.
just keep that in mind. You know, they're PTSD. It's pretty much PTSD. It's PTSD, and you're gonna, you know, so you want to just be cognizant of that.
Yeah. And I think depending on the situation too, I don't know if Zoom can hear the sharing, but you know, it's different comments, and try not to make anything into a joke. You know, there could be marriages that are actually separated from this. There could be someone who's in their late 50s that suddenly now decided to live their authentic self. And the collateral damage behind them isn't easy. So maybe to take into account the actual scenario, and the pain that could be caused or uplifted from this, I think is a very delicate, that we definitely don't have time for. But humor never works. Try, you know, I think that my biggest, my point was when I came out and I was around a lot of men because I was in a sports industry, the joke would be, we've lost a good one. Like, damn it, we've lost her to the other team. That's not funny. It was never owed to you, was never your possession, was never meant to be for men. Yes, that you lost, you know.
Do that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man. Or, you know, like, oh well, at least you're a lesbian, you know. Gay men, that's gross. Like that's horrible. And that's the thinking. You know, humor never works, you know, whether it's lighthearted or not. And actually being a bystander and allowing it is probably just as bad. And I'm sure some of you have those friends like, Danny over there who always makes inappropriate jokes. Again, your authentic self, put Danny in his place, you know, or don't let it slide. You know, even if there's nobody queer in the room and Danny's popping off about something, say something. If you're a bystander and you allow it, then you're just as bad. Because that's why it's slow moving forward, not because there's so many bad people against. There's just not enough people willing to push back that are good people.
Something when we come out and sitting down of our choices and respecting.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just basic respect
Yeah.
for humans and treat them like you would treat anybody else, but
Yeah.
you want to be cognizant of those differences in emotions and what these individuals have probably gone through
Mhm.
growing up and getting where they're at.
Yep.
Because if they can afford to buy a $2 million home, they had to work pretty hard and probably suppress who they were to get there.
I think we all a little bit guilty. I think everyone, even you can relate. You don't even have to be in the queer community. Have you maybe pretended to be something else with a client, just trying to keep up with that client's pace? You know, it's like when you pop on the treadmill, you're just trying to keep up with what they want me to be. And I think the best realtors are the ones that just go at their own speed. And I don't, you know, if we go against the grain a little bit, that's okay. If we don't vibe, we're maybe not meant to work together. But yes, I think that's a really good point. And if someone does come out to you, be a listener. You know, you don't have to question everything because you maybe don't need to know everything. You know, they might not be ready to share all of the subcontext that goes in it. Just be a listener, a vessel.
I think we should be when we are posting those things.
Mhm.
Then there is a difference, right? When we have a client, we build some relationship. But when we are posting those things, what are some do's and don'ts that we do suggest?
Hosting an open house.
Because we completely strange.
Mhm.
We don't know. Just like looking at them about their gender identity.
Mhm.
So how should we become a good host, not to discriminate anyone, anyone?
I think when you get into conversation with someone, it's truly just staying as generic as you can until they share more. You know, watch what subjects we dive into, watch what you know, niche we're putting them into. Again, with the pronouns, it's really hard right off the jump. But you know, if it's like my husband's upstairs, da, 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 oh, does he like it? You know, are you gonna go get them? I'm gonna go get him. Why don't you go, you know, you can already use inclusive language right off the jump until you know anything further, until you can identify she, him, he, her.
They, them is safe to use.
Yeah, they, them is safe.
Perfectly acceptable to use.
I think also, you know, at an open house, it's you already have to deviate a little bit. You know, I think fall's coming up, Thanksgiving's coming up, and I remember, you know, especially even religious, don't assume that everyone celebrates Thanksgiving. Don't assume everyone celebrates, you know, so you're not going to be at an open house and be like, what are you doing for Christmas? Right. You know, it's kind of the same thing. You just wouldn't go diving in to put them in an uncomfortable situation. Like, yeah, never guess if a man and a woman walk in, don't guess they're married. Don't guess they're romantically involved. They could be brother, sister. They could be friends. They could be roommates. So it's kind of the same way you would approach anything. You are just a blank slate until they paint the canvas. So all of what they present to you is all that you know, right? So if you go in there already painted and like, oh yeah, well, yeah, is your husband here? Or, you know, same thing with the queer community. What they're willing to share is what you're willing to output.
And I use the term partner because it's generic. It doesn't matter if you're gay or straight, married, instead of husband and wife, your partner, your life partner. You can use that line if you're unsure. Just a thought.
Yeah. Or the person you came in with, you know, the person, you know, like, you know, the person who accompanied you, and then they'd be like, oh, my husband, he's hopeless. Like he'll be in the garage. Like, you know, I don't know what they're going to say back, but then you're comfortable enough. They've invited you in. That's my husband. Great. I think that's better than assuming and having to then correct you uncomfortably. I mean, a lot of clients ask me, you know, they see that I have a wedding ring, and the first thing they say is, what does your husband do? And then we're both in this kind of gross, muggy atmosphere where I'm like, my wife is a softball coach, you know, but it's taken me a long time I used to just say softball coach because I was just, I didn't like that muggy atmosphere that they left me in. You did this to me. So let that resonate, you know, that I didn't ask for that, but now, I mean, I'm getting a lot better, you know, but I outwardly, I'm just my authentic self now.
That took a while to get there.
Yes, there was a lot of just hiding behind my coffee cup,
Yeah.
shaking, softball. Yeah.
And
Mhm. Okay, Zoom, we will wrap this up. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. If you want more information, you can get my email and my phone number from somebody. Raymond will share it.
That would be fun.
Thank you.
Thanks. Stop share.